Yom Kippur, Israel's most holy day. 4,000 Egyptian troops and tanks surged over the Suez Canal.
We'd been waiting for this moment for 5 years, the moment of crossing the canal. Our cries shook the ground under the Israeli enemy. The cry of God is great made all our hair stand up on end.
The Egyptian army sped ahead, eager to retake lost territory. American Jews demanded immediate help for Israel. Washington was in a dilemma. Supplying its ally Israel risked sacrificing Arab goodwill. The State Department stalled.
There was an argument as to whether transport was available. And the Pentagon suggestion was that private transport be leased.
We were very disappointed and angry that supplies were arriving so slowly and only on El Al planes. The air convoy was delayed again and again.
The Egyptians kept up their attack.
The United States began to understand that we were in a serious situation when we suddenly changed our tune from this very blithe, typically Israeli self-confidence to a report that as a result of what happened, we were losing our lifeblood.
Sadat was triumphant. He had regained land Egypt lost in the Six-Day War. But the Russians sensed disaster ahead. They urged Sadat to accept a ceasefire.
He would benefit from a ceasefire. Otherwise, he'd be forced to retreat. But Sadat wouldn't listen.
In Washington, President Nixon ended the delay over the arms shipments.
Nixon said when the option was brought to him to send 2, 3 American planes, said, let's send a lot, because we are going to be criticized anyhow. And we will be criticized for whatever we do, for 1 plane or 2 planes, for 40 planes. So let's do it in an effective way.
The airlift put the world's largest power publicly alongside Israel. Now it was Moscow's allies that faced defeat. Now the Israelis crossed the Suez Canal into Egypt. Soon, most of the Egyptian army would be stranded in the Sinai.
Then Sadat got terrified. He spoke on the phone directly to Brezhnev. I was there. I remember him begging, save us from these Israeli tanks.
Cut off in the desert, the Egyptians faced defeat. Moscow called for a ceasefire.
They realized that the greater the military victory on the part of the Israelis, the greater defeat of Soviet supply, and a general weakening of the Soviet position in the entire region.
The Soviets and Henry Kissinger rapidly agreed proposals for a ceasefire. As Kissinger arrived in Israel to break the news to the Israelis, the superpowers' ability to restrain their allies would be tested.
We had made commitments which some of our leaders, especially Golda Meir, our Prime Minister, believed to have been rather rash. And when he landed, he said, I'm going to be chastised for this.
Israel wasn't yet willing to end the war.
Kissinger explained what happened, and he vowed to continue to help Israel in case there is a renewal of fighting.
With America's connivance, Israel stepped up its onslaught. The Soviets were outraged.
Brezhnev wrote a letter to Nixon saying, how is it when we've agreed to act jointly that the Israelis are continuing to advance? It is undermining all our attempts to make peace. We suggested that both the Americans and the Soviets send troops to the Middle East to make Israel accept the ceasefire. But there was also a sentence that said, if you won't do it, we will have to consider unilateral action.
The Soviet leaders had every reason to look at this as if it had been some sort of a plot. And they reacted very violently, and they sent us an extremely tough note saying that they want to join the American-Soviet intervention, and if not, they would act unilaterally.
Kissinger deliberately upped the ante. Determined to forestall any Soviet intervention in the Middle East, he placed American nuclear forces on heightened alert.
The basic purpose was to generate a lot of traffic that the Soviet Union would pick up before they received our reply to know that this was getting serious.
Moscow didn't react to the alert. They had already abandoned the idea of unilaterally sending troops.
That was clearly a political victory for the United States, a major political victory that had repercussions in a Cold War far beyond the Middle East.
Under American pressure, Israel allowed food and water to reach the trapped Egyptian army. Kissinger wanted Egypt defeated, but not destroyed. With the Israelis just 100 kilometers from Cairo, the Egyptians were forced into their first ever face-to-face talks with Israel. Moscow was not involved.
The Egyptians saw that the vehicle for getting on with what subsequently became disengagement agreements between Egypt and Israel, that it was the United States that carried all the cards.
Henry Kissinger became the world's most famous frequent flyer. Shuttle diplomacy gave him easy access to Sadat.
The relationship had fundamentally changed. I mean, since the war, Sadat believed that the main global party he should woo was the Americans.
Kissinger's travels didn't bring about permanent peace. They showed America was winning the Cold War in the Middle East, but there was a price to pay.
Я думаю, что эти события, они оказали...
These events unfavorably affected the process of détente.
на разрядку в том смысле,
They strengthened the mistrust of the Soviet Union towards the United States.
недоверие Советского Союза к Соединенным Штатам